Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Larson. Thanks for joining me in another episode of Keep It Real. Last time we did an episode on the effects of time-restricted eating. So if you remember, what the researchers did was they delayed breakfast by 90 minutes. So the subjects who were following this program ate breakfast 90 minutes later, and then they ate dinner 90 minutes earlier. So basically, in effect, what that did is that increased their fasting window overnight by 3 hours. And so just by doing that one simple thing without making any dietary changes whatsoever, just restricting basically their eating window by 3 hours, they had a significant drop in body fat percentage compared to the group that did not make this change. And so that kind of piggybacks on, or the study I'm going to mention today piggybacks on that concept, but it's a little bit different. And I came across this study today, and I just had to do an episode on it because it's at the Salk. It came out of the Salk Institute, which is right here in my backyard in San Diego. It's down in La Jolla, and so I thought, hey, this is a local study, and it was really interesting. So I'll just report on that a bit today. So basically, what they did was this was a mouse study, and it was a mouse study because what they did was they knocked out something called the circadian cycle. And the circadian cycle, or the circadian rhythm, is dictated by certain genes, by certain hormones, and it's kind of our sleep-wake cycle. It's also part of our eating cycle. And so what they did in these mice is they knocked out this mechanism. Obviously, you can't do that in humans, so oftentimes we have to study certain things in mice and then make some conclusions for humans. But the reason why they did this is because oftentimes in humans, this cycle gets disrupted. And when this cycle gets disrupted, the feeding cravings and kind of our overall feeding cycle changes, and that could lead to a lot of things like obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease, elevated cholesterol and triglycerides. So a lot of the things that we talk about as very common issues that we're dealing with that oftentimes cause chronic disease. And so researchers wanted to evaluate a very specific process similar to what we discussed last time. And so what they did is they had two groups of mice. Both groups had the removal of this circadian rhythm process. One group had access to food 24 hours a day. The other group only had access to food for 10 hours per day. So in other words, they had a 10-hour restricted eating window. Similar to that study that I talked about last time, where they had an increased fasting period overnight, and then they had a decreased eating window. So basically, they just made food available in the testing group for only 10 hours. And not real surprisingly, the animals that did not have a circadian rhythm, they had access to food 24 hours a day, they became obese, they developed diabetes, and they had significant effects to their blood sugar metabolism, and also their cholesterol and other fatty acids got out of whack. And for the group that only had a 10-hour restricted feeding window, didn't have any of those effects whatsoever. They stayed healthy, they stayed lean, their blood sugar metabolism stayed the same, their lipid metabolism, like their cholesterol and triglycerides, stayed healthy and stayed the same, and they did not develop obesity and fatty liver disease. And so basically, just making this one minor change, they had significant improvements in their health. Oh, and by the way, the animals that had access to food 24 hours a day compared to the animals that had that 10-hour restricted window, they ate the exact same amount of calories. So in that 10-hour period that the testing animals had access to food, they ate just as much food, but there's something about the genetics and the fat-burning hormones and the enzymes of digestion all work better in that 10-hour feeding window as opposed to kind of eating all day long. And so this very much happens with humans. Humans, we have access to food as much as we want, and so oftentimes our circadian rhythm, our feeding window, our sleep-wake cycle gets thrown off for a whole variety of reasons that we can maybe talk about some other time, but just know that this circadian rhythm gets very thrown off in humans, and that causes them to not get the signals of their body to eat and to not eat. It can really throw off their overall metabolism. So again, as a piggyback study from last time, it's such a simple process without changing really what you're eating, at least according to these studies, without changing even the calories that you're eating, the calorie count, the calorie content that you're eating. By just changing your eating window, you can have a really significant effect on your overall metabolism, blood sugar metabolism, overall lipid metabolism, and ability to burn fat. So little food for thought. It might be something that you want to experiment with and see how it goes. So hope that was helpful, and I'll keep reading you the studies and bringing you the information. Until then, keep it real.